The Galactic Confederation of Sentient Species prided itself on many things. Technological advancement that would make any pre-FTL civilization weep with envy, diplomatic protocols so nuanced they required their own translation matrices, and educational institutions that welcomed diverse species from across the known universe. The Confederation particularly enjoyed congratulating itself on this last point, as if allowing beings from gravity wells higher than 0.8 standard units to attend their prestigious academies was some grand act of charity, rather than a begrudging acknowledgement that even Deathworlders deserved education. The Viridian Academy of Interstellar Combat Arts was the most prestigious of these institutions, at least according to the Viridians, who had founded it and never shut up about it since. Located on a planet with precisely 0.76 standard gravity units, just low enough to be comfortable for most spacefaring species, while still appearing impressively rigorous on recruitment materials, the Academy had trained the galaxy's elite warriors for over 3 centuries. And today, announced Professor Zilnux, his 4 vestigial tentacles twitching with what passed for excitement among the Ulari species, we welcome a new student from Sol 3. The announcement rippled through the amphitheater-staffed classroom. A Deathworlder? Here? The whispers crescendoed as 37 pairs of eyes, optical sensors, and various sensory apparatuses turned toward the back row, where a human female sat with perfect stillness. Her face betrayed nothing, which was, in itself, terrifying to several empathic species present who couldn't fathom a being with such emotional control. "Ah, yes, there she is," Zilnok continued, gesturing with a tentacle that had been purely decorative for the past 6 million years of Ulari evolution. "From Earth, Gravity 1 standard units. The committee made an exception to our usual 0.9 maximum given her unique qualifications. One bold Phyrexian student raised 3 of his 7 appendages. Professor, isn't it dangerous having a Deathworlder in combat training? I've heard they can snap bones just by accident." The human's lips curled slightly at the edges. Not enough to qualify as what humans called a smile, but enough to make the nearest Chelaxian student scoot their hoverpod 3 meters to the right. An excellent question, Throdic. Which brings us to today's lesson. Zillax activated the holographic display at the center of the room. High-gravity adaptations and their combat applications. While Deathworlders like our new student possess concerning physical attributes, dense musculature, reinforced skeletal structures, and alarming reaction speeds, they remain at a disadvantage in true combat scenarios. Now the human's expression did change, one eyebrow rising approximately 0.4 centimeters. Several students instinctively ducked. "You see," Ziliak continued, oblivious to the growing tension, "raw strength and speed mean nothing without proper technique. Our combat traditions have been refined over millennia by species who have long since evolved beyond the need for physical confrontation." The human raised her hand, slowly, carefully, as if she were handling volatile antimatter. "Yes, Earth student." Zilinax acknowledged, the Ulari equivalent of a condescending smile spreading across his face tentacles. "With respect, Professor, I believe there's a misunderstanding about human combat philosophy." Her voice was soft, controlled, yet somehow filled the room more effectively than the Academy's state-of-the-art acoustic enhancement system. "We don't rely solely on our physical attributes." Zilnik's face tentacles rippled with amusement. "Of course. All species believe their combat techniques are sophisticated. That's natural ethnocentrism. Perhaps a demonstration would help clarify? Drelnik, would you assist?" The Acadian named Drelnik practically leapt from his seat, all 6 limbs flexing in anticipation. Standing at nearly 3 meters tall with exoskeletal armor that could deflect medium-grade plasma weapons, Drelnik was the Acadians' reigning combat champion. Though Acadians evolved on a 0.7 G world, genetic engineering had made them the Confederation's premier warriors. "Happy to demonstrate, Professor." Drelnik's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a friendly gesture, but looked disturbingly like a predator anticipating a meal. "I'll be gentle with the Deathworlder." The human remained seated, her expression unchanged. "Please join Drelnik on the demonstration platform," Zelnok instructed. "If it's all the same," the human replied, still not moving. I'm comfortable here. A wave of murmurs swept through the class. Was she afraid? Sensible but embarrassing, Drelnik's mandibles clicked more rapidly. The Deathworlder fears confrontation. And these are the creatures we've been warned about? I don't fear confrontation, the human clarified. I simply don't need to move to defeat you. The classroom erupted. Several students engaged emergency tranquilization protocols to manage their shock. Drelnik's exoskeleton flushed the deep crimson of Akkadian rage. You believe you can defeat me without moving from your seat. Drelnik's translator barely managed to render his clicking speech through his fury. I know I can. The human finally smiled. Several students dove under their desks. Professor Zilnox, sensing a valuable teaching moment, raised his primary tentacles for silence. This presents an excellent opportunity to demonstrate why technique trumps physical advantages. Drelnik, please proceed with a standard Akkadian intimidation approach. Drelnik needed no further encouragement. He dropped into a combat stance, his exoskeleton plates flaring to increase his already imposing silhouette. The rattling sound that emerged from his thorax was designed by evolution to paralyze prey species with fear. 2 vermilion students promptly fainted. The human just watched, still seated, still smiling. Your primitive nervous system doesn't recognize superior threat posturing, Drelnik concluded, advancing toward the classroom's rising tiers where the human sat. Perhaps a more direct demonstration before you take another step, the human interrupted. I should mention that I've already defeated you. Drelnik froze mid-step, mandibles quivering with indignation. Impossible. You haven't moved. Movement is overrated, she replied. While Professor Zilnox was introducing me, I analyzed 37 different ways to incapacitate you without leaving my seat. I selected the most efficient method and implemented it while you were flexing. Ridiculous, Drelnik scoffed, though a note of uncertainty had crept into his clicking. What method could possibly? The air circulation system in this room, the human explained calmly. I noticed it operates on a standard Confederation filtration protocol with predictable circulation patterns. I also noticed you're standing directly beneath Vent 7B, which provides optimal dispersal for the contents of this. She held up a small capsule between 2 fingers. What is that? Zilnik demanded, suddenly concerned. A harmless particulate that reacts with the specific biochemistry of Akkadian exoskeletons. It causes temporary rigidity in the joint membranes, starting right about now. As if on cue, Drelnik's intimidating posture faltered. A soft creaking sound emanated from his exoskeletal joints as they began to stiffen. This is, he began, before his mandibles locked in mid-click. Within seconds, the Academy's champion stood frozen, like an elaborate statue. Don't worry, the human assured the astonished classroom. The effect is temporary and completely painless. He'll regain movement in approximately 17 minutes, which should be right around the time class ends. Professor Zilnox's tentacles went limp with shock. But when did you? I released the capsule contents 27 minutes ago when I first entered the room, she explained. I simply created a timed dispersal mechanism adjusted to the room's circulation system. The capsule I'm holding is empty, just a distraction while the compound took effect. The silence in the classroom was absolute. Even the Academy's background hum seemed to have quieted in awe. You see, the human continued, finally standing and approaching the paralyzed Drelnik. Humans don't just rely on our physical adaptations. We evolved on a world where we were rarely the strongest species. We had to become tactical thinkers, to anticipate threats before they developed, to win conflicts before they began. She circled the frozen Akkadian champion, her movements graceful despite the crushing gravity of the Academy. On Earth, we have a combat philosophy thousands of years old. It teaches that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. She gestured toward Drelnik. I didn't need to move, because the battle was won before he even knew we were engaged. Professor Zilnox had recovered enough to fight his academic curiosity. But that's not combat. That's chemical warfare, is it? The human asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Your Academy definition of combat includes psychological intimidation, as Drelnik attempted. It includes technological advantages, as your powered exosuits demonstrate. Why not tactical foresight and environmental manipulation? She returned to her seat, as calm as when she'd first entered. Besides, she added, isn't the most advanced form of combat the one where victory is achieved with minimal expenditure of energy? Before Zilex could formulate a response, the classroom door slid open, revealing the Academy's Chancellery representative, a Thurgian whose frill was pulsing with administrative urgency. Professor Zilnox, the Thurgian announced. The Combat Evaluation Committee requires your presence immediately. It appears we need to reassess our curriculum. The representative's compound eyes fixed on the human student before adding, and possibly our admissions standards. As Zilnax followed the representative out, the human addressed her classmates, who were still staring at her with various expressions of awe, terror, and in one case, what appeared to be romantic infatuation. For what it's worth, she said, I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. Humans don't have a monopoly on tactical innovation, we just have a different starting point. The frozen form of Drelnik began to emit a slight whistling sound as his respiratory system struggled against the temporary paralysis. The human approached him again, adjusting something at the base of his thorax. There. That should make breathing easier until the effect wears off. She returned to her seat just as the Academy's timekeeper chimed the end of class. As the students filed out, giving her a conspicuously wide berth, the human remained behind. When only she and the still paralyzed Drelnik remained, she sighed. I really am sorry about this, she told him, though he couldn't respond. But they needed to understand. The galaxy has spent too long underestimating humans, and it's gotten people killed. Better a harmless demonstration than a tragic miscalculation later. Drelnik's compound eyes swiveled toward her, the only movement his frozen form could manage. The paralytic will wear off completely in about 5 minutes, she explained. And when it does, I hope you'll consider something. I didn't defeat you today. Your assumptions did. She gathered her belongings and headed for the door, but paused before exiting. By the way, she added, I'd be honored to train with you sometime. From what I've read, Akkadian joint locking techniques are remarkably similar to human jiu-jitsu. I think we could learn a lot from each other. With that, she left Drelnik alone with his thoughts, and a newfound respect for Deathworlders that would soon spread throughout the Academy. The story of what happened in Professor Zilnuk's combat class that day spread through the Viridian Academy faster than a quantum entanglement cascade. By mealtime, even the notoriously out-of-touch atmospheric composition department had heard about the Deathworlder who defeated the Academy champion without rising from her chair. Most of the accounts were wildly exaggerated. According to one version circulating among the photosynthetic studies students, the human had psychically commanded Drelnik's own exoskeleton to betray him. The engineering department insisted she had reprogrammed the Academy's environmental systems using only her primitive human neural interface. The diplomatic corps cadets, always striving for accuracy, merely reported that she had enacted a paradigm shift in interspecies power dynamics through asymmetric tactical implementation in the Academy's central dining hall, designed to accommodate everything from methane breathers to silicon-based life forms. The human sat alone at a table calibrated for Earth-standard gravity. Around her, the usual cacophony of digestive sounds and mealtime conversations had diminished to nervous whispers. Mind if I join you? The human looked up to find an Arkelian hovering beside her table. With tentacles that spiraled elegantly beneath a translucent bell-shaped body, Arkelians resembled what humans called jellyfish, though they were considerably more talkative and less venomous. Usually, please, the human gestured to the opposite seat, which immediately reconfigured to accommodate the Arkelian's floating physiology. I'm Plex. The Arkelian introduced herself, her tentacles forming the patterns that accompanied formal Arkelian greetings. Xenobiological ethics, third cycle, nice to meet you, the human replied. Though I suspect you already know who I am, the entire Academy knows who you are after this morning. Plex's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate amusement. Though opinions vary on whether you're a tactical genius or a walking biohazard, the human's lips quirked upward. Can't I be both? Plex's luminescence flickered. The Arkelian equivalent of laughter. I like you, Deathworlder. Most species would be defensive. My name's not actually Deathworlder, the human pointed out, taking a bite of her synthesized protein cube, which had been specifically calibrated to human nutritional requirements, while still managing to taste like nothing in particular. I know, Plex replied. But until we're friends, using your actual designation seems presumptuous. Arkelian custom, fair enough. So, did you approach me out of curiosity, or is there something specific you wanted to discuss? Both, Plex admitted. Curiosity is my species' primary evolutionary advantage, and specifically, I wanted to ask about your combat demonstration. The human nodded. I figured I'd be answering questions about that for a while. It's not what you think. Plex's tentacles twisted in what might have been embarrassment. I'm not concerned about the technical aspects. I'm more interested in the ethical framework behind your approach. Now the human looked genuinely intrigued. Go on. You defeated Drelnik without causing pain, without risking permanent injury, and while minimizing his humiliation. You even adjusted his breathing apparatus when he struggled. Plex's bioluminescence pulsed thoughtfully. That suggests a combat philosophy that prioritizes restraint and compassion, which contradicts everything the Confederation teaches about Deathworlders. The human set down her protein cube, giving Plex her full attention. The Confederation has a very simplified understanding of human combat philosophy. They focus on our capacity for violence rather than our reasons for engaging in it. Explain? Humans can be incredibly violent. Our history proves that beyond doubt. But our greatest warriors weren't celebrated for how many enemies they killed. They were celebrated for why they fought and how they conducted themselves in victory. Plex's tentacles swirled in contemplation. This morning you mentioned winning without fighting. Is that a common human philosophy? It's one of many approaches. That particular concept comes from an ancient Earth text called The Art of War. Its author argued that the highest form of victory is defeating an enemy's strategy before battle begins. Yet the Confederation portrays humans as battle-hungry berserkers. Plex observed. The human's expression darkened slightly. That's because they've primarily encountered humans in defensive scenarios. When we're protecting our worlds or our people, efficiency takes precedence over elegance. But even then, unnecessary suffering is considered a failure of strategy, not a victory condition. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the dining hall entrance. Drelnik had arrived, his imposing exoskeleton now fully mobile and surrounded by a group of fellow Achadeans who seemed to be offering a mixture of consolation and tactical advice. The human watched him calmly. He's recovered well. You don't seem concerned, Plex noted. Should I be? Acadians have a cultural mandate to reclaim lost honor through combat challenges. It's deeply ingrained in their societal structure. The human nodded thoughtfully. I suspected as much. That's why I made sure the paralytic compound was completely harmless and temporary. I needed to make a point without creating an enemy. Yet you must have known this would establish you as a target. Sometimes the best way to avoid fighting is to demonstrate why fighting would be unwise. The human shrugged. Besides, I meant what I said about wanting to learn from him. Acadian martial traditions are fascinating. Drelnik had noticed her now. The dining hall fell silent as he approached her table, his exoskeletal plates shifting subtly to project dignity rather than aggression. Deathworlder, he acknowledged with a formal click of his mandibles. The professors have been discussing your methodology this morning. I imagine they have, the human replied, her tone respectful but unapologetic. They have determined that while unconventional, your approach did not violate Academy protocols. Drelnik's compound eyes fixed on her. More importantly, I have been reviewing the encounter myself, and your conclusion? You identified my vulnerabilities, exploited them efficiently, and neutralized me without causing injury or lasting shame. Drelnik's mandibles shifted into what initiated Acadians would recognize as a gesture of professional respect. By Acadian combat standards, your victory was elegant. The human inclined her head slightly. I appreciate that assessment, especially coming from the Academy champion. Former champion, Drelnik corrected. The rankings were updated at midday. You now hold that position. Murmurs rippled through the dining hall. The human blinked, the first sign of surprise she'd shown since arriving at the Academy. That wasn't my intention, she said. I was merely responding to a challenge. Intention is irrelevant. Results determine rank. Drelnik's posture stiffened formally. However, I request the opportunity to study your combat methodology. Such tactical innovation would benefit my training. Translation, he wanted to learn her techniques so he could overcome them in a rematch. The human understood the subtext perfectly, but chose to respond to the literal request. "I'd be honored to exchange training methods," she replied. "As I mentioned earlier, I believe our species' approaches have interesting parallels." Drelnik seemed momentarily thrown off by her ready agreement, but recovered quickly. "The third training quadrant, after final bell? I'll be there." With a final mandible click, Drelnik departed, his entourage following with considerably more confusion than they'd arrived with. Plex's bioluminescence had shifted to a pattern indicating amazement. "You just turned a potential blood feud into a training partnership. That's not how these situations typically resolve." The human resumed eating her flavorless protein cube. "Fighting should be the last resort, not the first response. Drelnik is intelligent enough to recognize that we're more valuable to each other as training partners than as enemies. You planned this outcome from the beginning," Palax realized. The demonstration, the specific choice of paralytic, even the adjustment to his breathing apparatus, it was all designed to earn his respect rather than his enmity. "I wouldn't claim that much foresight," the human demurred. "But I did try to leave the door open for a constructive relationship. Burning bridges rarely serves long-term interests." Plex's tentacles rippled with renewed curiosity. "You're nothing like what the Confederation teaches about humans. Few species are exactly what others believe them to be," the human replied. "That's why places like this academy are so important, despite their flaws. Direct interaction challenges preconceptions better than any lecture. Is that why you came here? To challenge preconceptions?" The human considered the question carefully before answering. "Partially, but mostly I came because the galaxy is a dangerous place, and understanding how different species approach conflict is essential for avoiding unnecessary wars. You came to a combat academy to prevent wars?" Plex bioluminescence pulsed in what might have been the Arkelian equivalent of raised eyebrows. "The best way to prevent wars is to understand how they're fought, and why they start in the first place." The human gestured around the dining hall, where dozens of species were engaged in their various forms of consumption. "Look around. Every species here evolved different approaches to survival, different values, different perceptions of threat. Most interspecies conflicts begin with misunderstanding those differences." Plex absorbed this perspective, her tentacles swirling thoughtfully. "So, your demonstration this morning was about correcting a dangerous misunderstanding about humans," the human confirmed. "The Confederation needed to recognize that we're strategic thinkers, not just brutes with dense muscles and tough bones. That underestimation has led to poor decisions in the past." Before Plex could respond, their conversation was interrupted by the Academy web announcement system. "Attention all cadets and instructors." The disembodied voice of the Chancellor reverberated through the hall. "Effective immediately, the combat philosophy curriculum will be expanded to include a new module on preemptive strategic resolution, with special emphasis on environmental tactical integration. Attendance is mandatory for all combat specialization tracks." The human's expression remained neutral, but there was a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "Impressive," Plex commented. "One demonstration and you've already changed the academy curriculum?" "Change was inevitable," the human replied. "The galaxy is evolving too quickly for rigid adherence to traditional combat methodologies. The Confederation's military approach needs to adapt, preferably before encountering something more dangerous than humans." "There are things more dangerous than Deathworlders?" Plex luminescence dimmed with concern. The human's expression grew serious. "The universe is vast, and danger comes in many forms. Physical strength is just one kind of power, often not the most significant." Their conversation was interrupted again, this time by the arrival of Professor Zilnux, who approached with the cautious deference usually reserved for unstable antimatter containment units. "Ah, there you are," he addressed the human, his tentacles twitching nervously. "The Academic Council requests your presence. It seems They're interested in discussing your perspective on combat philosophy. The human nodded and rose from her seat. Thank you for the conversation, Plex. I hope we can continue it another time. Looking forward to it, Deathworlder, Plex replied, her luminescence patterns forming what humans might interpret as a smile. As the human departed with Professor Zilnok, the dining hall erupted into excited discussions. The Academy had stood for 3 centuries as the galaxy's premier institution for combat training, its methodologies unchallenged, its assumptions unquestioned, and a Deathworlder had just upended everything without leaving her chair. 2 standard months later, the Viridian Academy of Interstellar Combat Arts barely resembled its former self. The rigid hierarchy that had defined it for centuries had given way to a more adaptable structure, with training methodologies drawn from dozens of worlds, including, most controversially, Earth. The human who had catalyzed this transformation now stood at the center of the Academy's primary demonstration arena, surrounded by students from 17 different species. Beside her stood Drelnik, his exoskeleton bearing the newly created insignia of Joint Combat Instructor, a position created specifically to accommodate their unprecedented training partnership. Today, the human announced to the assembled students, we're exploring the concept of leveraging environmental factors in combat scenarios, a methodology pioneered by our instructor, Drelnik added, his mandibles clicking with what had become genuine respect. Though my species would have preferred to discover it under different circumstances, this earned a ripple of amusement from the class. The story of their first encounter had become Academy legend, embellished with each retelling until some versions claimed the human had actually turned Drelnik's exoskeleton transparent and rearranged his internal organs. Alphabetically, the fundamental principle, the human continued, is recognizing that combat doesn't begin with physical engagement. It begins with perception, understanding your environment, your opponent, and yourself. She gestured to the arena around them, which shifted from standard training configuration into a detailed simulation of an asteroid mining facility. For today's exercise, each of you will identify 3 environmental elements that could be tactically leveraged, regardless of your species' physical attributes. As the students dispersed to analyze the simulated environment, Drelnik turned to his co-instructor. They're progressing well, he observed. Even the Floavians, who traditionally rely solely on their toxin capabilities. All species can adapt, given the right incentives, the human replied. The key is helping them recognize advantages beyond their evolutionary specializations. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chancellor Thrix, whose photosensitive eye stalk swiveled to take in the training session. Impressive, the Chancellor acknowledged. The Combat Evaluation Committee has been reviewing the performance metrics since implementing your curriculum modifications. Combat readiness scores have increased by 37% across all species categories, including the traditionally non-combatant species, the human noted with particular satisfaction. Indeed, the diplomatic cause is particularly interested in your approach. They believe it may have applications beyond military contexts. The human raised an eyebrow. Oh, the ability to resolve conflicts without physical confrontation has obvious diplomatic value, the Chancellor explained. Your methodology suggests that with proper training, even physically disadvantaged species can effectively protect their interests. That was rather the point of my demonstration, the human admitted. Though I didn't expect it to resonate quite so quickly. The Chancellor's eye stalks swiveled toward her directly, a gesture of unusual focus for his species. The Confederation has traditionally viewed Deathworlders as valuable but limited assets, physical enforcers rather than strategic partners. A costly misconception, the human replied, her tone carefully neutral. We're now reassessing at the highest levels, the Chancellor confirmed. Which brings me to the purpose of my visit. The Confederation Security Council has requested your presence at their next assembly. Even Drelnik's compound eyes widened at this announcement. The Security Council rarely acknowledged the existence of the Academy, let alone requested input from its instructors. May I ask why? The human inquired, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. The emergence of the Void Hive in the Epsilon sector. The Chancellor replied grimly. Their tactics have proven resistant to conventional military responses. The human nodded thoughtfully, They operate with distributed intelligence and without central command structures. Traditional hierarchical combat methodologies would be ineffective. Precisely. The Chancellor's eye stalks quivered with what might have been impressed surprise. You're familiar with them. I've studied the reports. The Void Hive represents exactly the kind of threat I mentioned when I first arrived. One where physical strength is irrelevant compared to adaptive strategy. Then you understand why the Council seeks your input. The human glanced at Drelnik, who inclined his head in a gesture of support. The Academy will manage without you for a short period, he assured her. This may be the opportunity we've been working toward. He turned back to the Chancellor. I'll address the Council, but on one condition. I want representatives from all member species present. Not just the traditional military powers. The Chancellor's eye stalks twitched with surprise. That's unprecedented. The full assembly includes over 200 species, many with no significant combat capabilities. That's exactly why they need to be there, the human insisted. The Void Hive doesn't distinguish between warrior species and non-combatants. Neither should our response. After a moment's consideration, the Chancellor's eye stalks dipped in acquiescence. I'll convey your condition to the Council, though I should warn you, many will question the value of consulting species that evolved on worlds with gravity as low as 0.3 standard units. The human's expression remained impassive, but there was a hint of something, perhaps disappointment, perhaps determination in her eyes. Chancellor, have you already forgotten the lesson of my first day at this academy? I assure you, no one who witnessed that demonstration will ever forget it, the Chancellor replied dryly. Then you should remember. I didn't defeat Drelnik because I evolved on a high-gravity world. I defeated him because I understood something fundamental about combat that the Academy had overlooked. And what was that? The Chancellor's eye stalks leaned forward with genuine curiosity. The human smiled, a gesture that no longer sent students diving for cover, though it still commanded attention. That true strength lies not in what evolution has given you, but in how creatively you use what you have. She gestured toward the training arena, where students of wildly different physiologies were collaboratively analyzing the simulated environment, each bringing unique perspectives based on their evolutionary backgrounds. Look at them, Chancellor. The Flavians are identifying chemical compounds in the simulation that even our sensors didn't catalog. The Thrallaxians are mapping vibration patterns that would be imperceptible to most species. The Archelians are tracking electromagnetic fluctuations that could reveal hidden systems. The Chancellor observed the training with newfound appreciation. I see your point. Each species brings unique perceptual advantages. Exactly. And the Void Hive succeeds precisely because it integrates multiple physiological perspectives into its strategy. The human's expression grew serious. To defeat them, the Confederation needs to do the same. Not just with its traditional warrior species, but with all its members. Drelnik's mandibles clicked in agreement. As the Deathworlder taught us, victory is achieved before battle begins, through understanding rather than force. The Chancellor's eye stalks dipped in a gesture of concession. Very well, I will recommend a full assembly to the Council. Though I suspect several members will require convincing, then perhaps, the human suggested with that same quiet confidence that had unnerved the Academy on her first day, they should be reminded of what happened the last time someone underestimated a supposedly inferior species. As the Chancellor departed, Drelnik turned to his co-instructor with what passed for amusement in Akkadian expression. You enjoy making the Confederation uncomfortable, don't you? I enjoy challenging assumptions, she corrected. Especially when those assumptions limit potential. A philosophy worthy of an Akkadian warrior philosopher, Drelnik acknowledged, though they would have expressed it with more mandible clicking. The human's laugh echoed through the training arena, a sound that had once terrified her fellow students, but had gradually become a welcome indication that their most challenging instructor was pleased with their progress. As they returned their attention to the training exercise, neither the human nor Drelnik noticed Chancellor Thrix lingering at the arena entrance. His eye stalks fixed thoughtfully on the Deathworlder who had arrived just 2 months ago and already reshaped not only the Academy, but potentially the Confederation itself. The Chancellor's administrative mind calculated the implications with precision. If one human could accomplish this much without leaving her chair, What might humanity achieve when they truly decided to move? The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, much like the species that had inspired it.